All right, hello, virtual friends and wonderful people of the internet. Today is my 28th birthday, which means it is the one day per year that I get to crave all of your attention on social media. Um, and as some of you know, I have unfortunately become a chronic pain patient, which has pretty much consumed my identity over the past 19 months. So I'm going to use today to explain everything that happened with my injury, how it's affected me, and everything that I have done to try and fix it. It has been 565 days of daily pain in both of my heels that has completely changed my life in every possible way. So if you're interested, you can swipe through these next few videos. If you're not, then I don't blame you at all. So the next slide, slide 2, is just going to cover the initial injury and what happened. Slides 3, 4, and 5 are going to be my sob story and kind of the low places this has taken me, make you guys feel bad for me for a little bit. Slide 6 is going to be recovery part 1, basically discussing pain science and all the things that I've learned throughout this process. And then slide 7 is going to discuss pretty much the most revolutionary research that has ever been done in the world of chronic pain. Um, so if you suffer from any chronic or recurring pain, chronic depression, chronic anxiety, then I do actually recommend listening to some of this. Or if you can't suffer through listening to me talk, then just skip to the last slide, or at least check out some of the books that I'm going to post in the comments. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm just going to quickly go over what happened during my injury and kind of what I was doing leading up to it. So once COVID hit, I started getting really into rehabbing all my previous sports injuries. I was strengthening all my small supporting muscles. I was improving my mobility, improving my flexibility, and getting really athletic again. So on December 26th, 2020, I did this exercise called the MOBO board, MOBO, which is essentially an ankle stability board, and it's used to strengthen your ankle muscles, strengthen all your foot muscles, and I was doing it to kind of strengthen all my ankle issues from previous sprained ankles. So I did that exercise for about 20 minutes, and the next morning I woke up with excruciating pain throughout both the bottom of my feet, unlike anything I'd ever felt before. After a couple days, it settled directly into the middle of the heel, both of my feet, exact same pain, exact same location. I've never felt anything like this. I still don't really know what happened. I could never get a real diagnosis. I don't know if it was a case of plantar fasciitis or a case of a trapped nerve in the heel. It didn't really have typical plantar fasciitis symptoms, very rare for it to be bilateral and to kind of hurt all day long. And so I was left very confused. And this is where I began my journey. It's time for Sob Story Part 1. So once this injury happened, I had to quit my job because I was working somewhere where I stood all day. And I became obsessed with fixing this and started researching feet 24/7. I'm still obsessed with it in a little more healthy way. But at that time, it was hard to say that I could ever be happy as a person until this was fixed. Unfortunately, as I have learned more about pain science, that obsession, that 1000% focus on fixing the injury, not allowing myself to be happy, basically kept the pain around. So anyways, I went to literally any doctor that I could find. I went to a podiatrist, I went to surgeons, I went to physical therapists, I went to chiropractors, I went to massage therapists, I went to acupuncturists, everything. And I'll just go down the list of all the things that I've tried for this. I initially tried rest, ice, stretching, exercises. Then I tried this thing called the Graston technique, which is like a physical therapist, chiropractic technique, active release therapy or active release technique, hot lasers, cold lasers, shockwave therapy, cortisone shot, ultrasound therapy, medical massage, everything. I've seen over 30 doctors for this and spent over $15,000 trying to fix this. About a year ago, right around my last birthday, I was experiencing depression for definitely the first time. I was just simply exhausted. I had gone to all the right people, done all the right things, and the pain would just not go away. I couldn't do anything that I enjoyed doing. No sports, no outdoor activities. My life completely revolved around my pain, and I no longer had any of my stress outlets. The worst part about this was just that it simply wasn't my fault. I didn't do anything wrong. I was literally trying to take care of my body, and I had absolutely no control over this injury. So this pretty much shattered my life into pieces, and still to this day affects me. It is a 24/7 battle to not completely give up on life as I go through this journey. So I think one of the most difficult parts about this is that if you see me, it doesn't really look like anything is wrong. I can still walk, I can still talk, I can still think, I still have most of my physical health, I still have all my brain function, all stuff that I'm absolutely grateful for. But if you see me, it doesn't look like anything is different. But on the inside, I'm absolutely a shell of myself. I am completely different person from the one that I was before December 26th. And I think that aspect of it really got to me. I felt like I was no longer progressing in life because all I did all day, every day was try to fix my feet. I spent multiple times a week in doctor's offices and dedicated my life to this, all to no avail. So I'll later explain how I kind of got out of this funk because I do believe that in most cases, depression can be a choice. It's very difficult. But after a period of time, your body, your brain starts to kind of recognize being depressed as your natural state, and it becomes harder to dig out of. And it is very difficult, but at the end of the day, it is only up to you to be happy. So that's sort of part one. And next, we'll get to the domino effect that this injury had on me in Sob Story Part 2. Let's get into Sob Story Part 2. So after this injury forced me to quit my job, I started spending my entire day researching feet. For the first 3 months of this injury, I spent hours and hours and hours staring at a computer screen, just researching the foot. It was all I did. I learned about every type of potential injury, all the little muscles, all the bones, ligaments, nerves, everything. I had to get to the bottom of this. Well, I didn't realize what staring directly at the computer for hours at a time was apparently doing to my already dry eyes. Additionally, I got a job working from home. So for the first time in my life, I was working in front of a computer screen all day. On April 2nd of 2021, I was driving and had this random flash of blurriness, and then it just kept happening. Throughout the day, I would have random flashes of blurriness that would last about 30 seconds, and then my eyes would slowly refocus. It was honestly pretty dangerous for me to be driving, but now I couldn't walk comfortably and I couldn't see comfortably. So I go to the eye doctor. and I get diagnosed with something called meibomian gland dysfunction, or MGD, which is pretty much just dry eye disease. So great, another chronic condition. Basically, the oil gland in my eyes are not secreting enough oil, and the point of these oil glands is to coat the surface of your eyes to keep them from drying out. And when you don't secrete enough oil, it causes symptoms such as blurriness, light sensitivity, and dryness. It's actually a very common condition, but they won't check for it at your routine eye checkup if you're not showing any symptoms. Many people have it and don't know it because it's usually asymptomatic in the early stages. So I do actually recommend asking your doctor about it to make sure you can catch it early, especially now that we all work from home and are doing Zoom meetings all day. So anyways, I've gotten this relatively under control, but for the first 10 months or so, it was brutal with constant intermediate blurring and just adding to my misery. I'm now currently on a routine of warm compressing my eyes twice a day. I use special eye drops, I take omega-3 supplements, and I'm just constantly making sure my eyelids are clean. Not to mention, I also did a few very expensive treatments and have spent thousands of dollars on products, drugs, various treatments, and appointments. I always used to wear my contacts. Now I wear my glasses to help with this. And, my feet were always kind of the main issue, but this just caused an additional layer of stress that contributed to my depression, while also taking thousands of dollars from my pocket. So at this point, I can't play sports, I can't see, so what could possibly be next? Well, we get to talk about it in Sob Story Part 3. Okay, so Sob Story Part 3. I promise this is the last sob story. It's going to get better if you just suffer through one more of these videos. So let's set the scene. It's August of 2021. I'm 8 months into my heel injury with no end in sight. I'm 4 months into my dry eye issues, and I am very quickly losing hope. Then, on August 9th, 2021, I was laying in bed when I felt this sudden sharp of pain in my chest. It literally felt like a heart attack. So I went to the ER and I was diagnosed with something called costochondritis. In fact, about 30% of ER visits with chest pain are from costochondritis because it really does feel like a heart attack. What is costochondritis? Basically, it's just unexplained chest pain. It's harmless, but it hurts like hell. And for most people, it goes away in a couple weeks, but it can also last for years. Also, there's not really any treatment. You can just do thoracic spine stretches and exercises that can kind of help. But really, other than that, you can get a cortisone shot and hope for the best. At this point, I was absolutely miserable. I couldn't run, jump, do lower body workouts. I could no longer do upper body workouts, and I couldn't see. So from August 2021 to January 2022 was the lowest that I had ever been in my life. I had no idea how I was going to get out of this. I had tried everything. I'd done everything right. I was going to various doctor appointments 3 or 4 times a week, and I was just simply hopeless. At this point is when I knew something needed to change. And that is when we get into recovery part 1 on the next slide. Okay, so finally we can be done listening to me complain. And if you have made it this far, then you're probably bored out of your mind, but I promise this is where it gets good, the recovery. Once 2022 hit, I decided to live out the cliche, new year, new me, and I was going to get myself out of this depression. I was going to change my mindset. I was going to try and be happy regardless of if I still had this physical pain or not. It was only up to me. I had already tried everything. I had already done everything right. I had already seen every type of doctor. I had already done every type of exercise, every type of treatment, tried every type of diet, every type of supplement, and nothing worked. There had to be something else that was driving this. So I started to do a lot of research on the science behind pain and the brain's influence on chronic pain, and found that the mind is the true driver of pain. This is it, guys. This is the solution to chronic pain. This is the solution to chronic depression, chronic anxiety, any chronic reoccurring condition in the body. It's extremely difficult, but there is a way out. There is way too much information, and I'm definitely going to miss some things, but this is how we need to start looking at chronic pain. So let's get started. First and foremost, pain should not be chronic. Our bodies are resilient and heal quickly. In fact, even when you break a big bone, such as your femur, it can repair itself even stronger than before. And even if you're feeling some residual pain after the fact, it's really just your brain producing that because it has already learned how to produce that pain. If pain is lasting for more than 3 months, it's not a structural issue. So, where is this pain coming from? It's coming from the brain. Let's first just discuss what pain is, how it develops, and how it becomes chronic. First of all, pain is not just a product of a structural problem or an injury. It's a complete experience of what is going on in your body, your mind, and your personal and social life. Also, pain is not just processed in the area where you are feeling pain. It is processed in the brain and the nervous system. Yes, you can have tissue damage, and that is relayed to the brain, but that's only one small factor that the brain takes into consideration when it is deciding how much pain to produce. From an evolutionary perspective, pain is a warning. It's a danger signal that our brain sends to our body to protect us from further damage. Pain is a good thing. However, sometimes the communication between our body and our brain is off. There's this example that was reported in the British Medical Journal in 1995 about a construction worker who jumped onto a 7-inch nail and it pierced all the way through his boot. He was in excruciating pain and had to be rushed to the hospital. They couldn't even cut the boot off until he was sedated with opioids because he was just in so much pain. When they removed the boot, they found that the nail went completely in between his toes and caused zero tissue damage. It missed any part of his body and just went through the boot. But his pain was very, very real. So how can this even happen? Basically, the sensory receptors in his body reported that there was an accident, and the brain perceived a threat and used our 5 senses in the context of the situation of seeing the nail go through the boot, seeing all the coworkers scared in their reactions, feeling the fear from the man from inside, and the brain gathered all of that information and decided to send an extreme danger signal to the body and produce pain. It was trying to protect him from walking further, produced real pain, but literally no tissue damage occurred. There should have been zero pain. But there was a miscommunication between the body and the brain. So this is just one of many examples showing how pain originates in the brain, and sometimes the brain and the body are not on the same page. But for now, let's shift to how pain becomes chronic. Our brain is essentially a huge computer and stores neuropathic signals as memories. The more often that pain happens, the easier it is for the brain to remember it. Over time, the brain becomes more and more sensitive and sends these pain signals even when there's no longer damage. For example, if you get back pain when you sit, every time you sit, your brain perceives it as dangerous, and that pain signal becomes learned and more natural. Now you start to fear sitting. You start to buy cushions. You start to worry about pain coming on. These are all reminders to the brain that this action of sitting is dangerous, and eventually your brain will create pain every time you sit in an attempt to protect you. In my case, I had this little injury to my foot somehow. I mean, the exercise wasn't even that hard. But then I became obsessed with the pain. I constantly brought attention to it, constantly researched it, constantly did treatments. And all that was doing was reminding my brain that it needed to protect me by causing more foot pain. Anyways, I could talk about pain science for hours, but it's honestly not even the best part. There is something much more revolutionary that can help all chronic pain, chronic body condition sufferers, which we will get to in the recovery part 2. All right, so we have finally made it to the best part, recovery part 2. Through all my research and the books that I read, which I'll put in the comments, I found that there's something deeper within us that is driving chronic pain, our unconscious mind. If there's one thing that you do after listening to this, please look up Dr. John Sarno. He is the most revolutionary doctor in the world of chronic pain and was way ahead of his time. Unfortunately, the medical industry will never promote his work because if they did, they'd make no money. Chronic pain is a billion-dollar industry, but that's because doctors are trying to treat the body part or the injury itself rather than the human being behind the injury. The vast majority of chronic pain is not structural, it is emotional. And this does not mean that the pain is in your head. It is very real. Dr. John Sarno was a physician of rehabilitation medicine, and he could not figure out why some of his patients got better and some didn't. Sometimes surgery worked, sometimes it didn't. He started noticing a trend in patients that developed chronic pain. They were overachievers, competitive, do-gooders, people pleasers, all things that benefited them in the physical world, but things that piss off the unconscious, that piss off the inner self, the inner child. So Dr. Sarno coined the term tension myositis syndrome, or TMS as it's called, as the cause of most chronic pain. The idea is that your mind creates pain symptoms in order to aid in the repression of unconscious thoughts, feelings, and rage. The unconscious mind has determined that these repressed thoughts, feelings, or emotions would be harmful to you if you were to become consciously aware of them, so instead it creates physical pain. I'll read that again. The idea of TMS is that your mind creates pain symptoms in order to aid in the repression of unconscious thoughts, feelings, and rage. The unconscious mind has determined that these repressed thoughts, feelings, or emotions would be harmful to you if you were to become consciously aware of them, so instead it creates physical pain. The physical pain is a distraction. It is your brain's way of protecting you from emotional pain. Physical pain is more widely accepted, easier to talk about, and easier to accept than physical pain, or than emotional pain, sorry. TMS is the cause of virtually every pain syndrome, including migraines, vertigo, tinnitus, irritable bowel syndrome, carpal tunnel, back pain, plantar fasciitis, irritable bladder, and much more. There are thousands of patients with years of chronic pain who got better simply by reading John Sarno's books. They didn't have to go to him. Over 6 million Americans suffer from this mysterious pain syndrome called fibromyalgia, which essentially is just unexplained pain throughout the entire body with no structural issues. Doctors have no clue what causes this. Guess what? TMS causes it. If there are no structural problems, there should not be pain. Even if there are structural problems, that does not mean there should be pain. As we age, the majority of people will have disc herniations in their back, slightly torn rotator cuffs in their shoulders. This is a normal part of aging, and this does not cause pain. In fact, there are plenty of studies that show that people with no pain can look at an MRI and see structural problems, and all of a sudden they feel pain in that area. No wonder surgeries don't work. And if it does, it's mostly because of the placebo effect, and the patient will likely feel pain in a new body part soon. Obviously, if you have a complete tear of something or a complete break of something, you're going to need surgery. But if pain reappears in that area, then it's a manifestation of TMS. TMS often happens in patients with tough childhoods. They repress those memories, so the brain creates physical pain in order to protect you from feeling those emotions again. It can even happen to people with a great childhood. In my case, I had a seemingly perfect childhood, 2 loving parents that were always there for me. However, my dad was much tougher on me in baseball, even though I liked basketball more. And I repressed that emotion my entire life in order to keep him happy. My brain was just waiting for the perfect time to showcase this repression in the form of physical pain. It waits for the perfect stressor. Before COVID, I was teaching English in Spain, traveling the world, living my best life. Then COVID hit, and that changed everything. I tried to rationalize everything by telling myself I was luckier than most, which I probably was. I had a good home to come back to, good family. But at the end of the day, COVID fucked up my life. I had no idea what to do anymore. My life plan for the next few years was ruined. That same year, my relationship with my sister started worsening a little bit, just building up that repression and unconscious rage, until one day on December 26, 2020, it was ready to snap. And at this point, I had lost basketball again and was kind of feeling that same emotion that I felt as a kid that I repressed from my father. Often, people with TMS do not even have a specific injury that sparks their pain. But the brain is smart. The brain is magnificent. John Sarno states that the brain sometimes chooses the perfect time to strike in order to trick the conscious mind. For example, a man who experiences the acute onset of pain in his arm while swinging a tennis racket will naturally assume it was the swing that hurt his arm. The reality is that the brain has decided the time is ripe for a physical diversion and chooses that moment to initiate the pain, because the person will assume that it stems from an injury, not a brain-generated condition that caused the pain. For me, my new little foot exercise was the perfect time for my brain to strike. Then, I obsessed over the pain for over a year, digging myself a deeper and deeper hole. It wasn't until 2022 that I found these books and started to believe my pain was not structural. No wonder why nothing was found on my MRI. No wonder why no treatment helped. I'm still in the process of becoming one with my unconscious mind, which is a forever ongoing process, and it's hard work. In order to recover from TMS, you have to believe it will work, or else it never will. For me, I'm like 90% of the way there. I do believe in this. I do believe this is the solution to all chronic pain and all chronic health conditions. It's just so hard to believe it for yourself, and there's still a tiny bit of doubt in the back of my mind. Alan Gordon, the author of one of the books I read called The Way Out, founded something called the Pain Psychology Center and practices pain processing therapy. Pain processing therapy aims to rewire neural pathways in the brain in order to deactivate pain. It is a system of psychological techniques that retrains the brain to respond to signals from the body properly. Remember, chronic pain is just a safe sensation that is being misinterpreted by the brain. For the past 3 months, I've been doing pain reprocessing therapy each week. Since my discovery of these books and going to therapy, my chest pain has decreased by about 90%, and my foot pain has decreased by about 60%. I still have a long way to go, but I finally see a way out. I have completely changed the way I approach my pain, and I truly believe that I can be happy. If you are suffering from any chronic condition, please check out these books. Chronic pain can be cured. Chronic conditions can be cured. Chronic depression and anxiety can be cured. You hold the power. If you've made it this far, then it's honestly amazing, and I appreciate you so much. This has been the worst 19 months of my life. But luckily, I still have many years to go, and I'll get out of this soon.